Tonight, New York Giants quarterback Jaxson Dart is facing criticism, including from one of his own teammates, for showing his political colors off the field.
Honor, what a privilege it is to be here. And without further ado, I'm grateful, I'm honored, I'm pleasured to introduce the 45th and 47th President of the United States of America, President Donald J. Trump.
I want to thank Jaxson Dart. This is going to be a future Hall of Famer in my book. Thank you. Thank you, Jaxson.
Dart is a 23-year-old second-year player, and his teammate, 22-year-old Abdul Carter, took to social media to react. Quote, "I thought this shit was AI. What we doing, man?" Carter wrote before deleting that post. Then Carter says that he and Dart are on good terms and had a conversation as men. But Dart's appearance and Carter's response are prompting a national debate. Jemele, what do you think? I mean, are we at a place where anybody can say that if you're an athlete, you shouldn't be up on a political stage speaking?
Well, sports and politics have always mixed. I mean, they've mixed since the days of George Washington. What changed about this narrative of sports and politics not belonging together is when, frankly, black athletes started to show more agency and started to speak more about some of the conditions that people in their community were facing, or even some of the experiences that they had. That's when it became, oh no, don't mix sports and politics. In this particular case, this was an unforced error by Jaxson Dart. Again, Donald Trump is historically unpopular. You are the quarterback of the New York Giants. What was the point? What is the upside in appearing at this rally? Now, he has a right to support whoever he wants, but Abdul Carter has a right to criticize his support of that. And a lot of athletes, partly what makes them hesitant about talking about their political beliefs is that they don't want the blowback and they don't want the resistance and how people might feel about it. So yeah, his teammate, who is a Muslim, who is a black man in America, had every right to question him about what that support means, especially when you are considered to be the face of the organization and the sort of default leader of the entire team.
They're both got the free speech rights to do and associate.
They sure do.
And neither one of them was using the football field or their jersey or their helmet as a platform.
He was actually leading a chant that was associated with the team at the rally, and it was incredibly embarrassing.
It's not during the game. It's not people who paid the I'm going to go watch Bruce Springsteen tomorrow night, and I'm going to agree with none of his politics, but I agree with all of his songs, and I'm going to enjoy that part of the show. And like, he's going to use the whole concert for that. Jaxson Dart is not using the Giant Stadium, MetLife Stadium, whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
But
it's not really
a private citizen.
It's not really about that. He's not a private citizen. I mean, he's a public figure.
He's
so
a private citizen. In his life, he gets to vote just like everybody else.
But who is his, when we think about who is he accountable to, it's his teammates first and his city second, right? His state, his team.
He's accountable to himself about his politics.
Well, he's going to be accountable on the internet.
I feel we're so hypocritical on this, Abby.
Why is that?
Because when Steve Kerr and the Warriors come out and condemn Trump, does anybody on this panel say, oh, that's out of line? They shouldn't do that. Jaxson Dart has every right to be there with the President of the United States. And when people are invited and teams win national championships and they're invited to the White House, they should go. And yet every time there's a political statement, we're not going to be there with Donald Trump, the media justifies it, says it's fine. When Jaxson Dart goes to rallies, all of a sudden we're going to criticize it?
But this is about the person, though, not just the office, though. That's
okay,
what I'm
was
saying.
there a person? Was everybody okay? Was anybody get upset with Steve Kerr?
Well, and by the way, all players didn't go see Obama. There were some that decided to sit out and not go because they didn't agree with his politics, and that's totally fine. I don't have an issue with that.
But it's not fine.
No, it's fine. You're talking about two different things. You're talking about,
I didn't say he didn't have a right to go. What I said is when you do that, you're going to open yourself up to criticism.
I think what's hypocritical is that there's one thing that distinguishes this from everything else for me. In no other situation am I aware of has the President of the United States ever come out and attacked someone, a professional athlete, for taking a stand, except when Donald Trump did that with Colin Kaepernick and said, and I quote, "Get that son of a bitch off this field right now, he's fired." That is an irresponsible, inappropriate thing, violation of everything the First Amendment is supposed to be about, to use your pressure as the President of the United States to try to get a professional athlete off of the field for expressing his free speech. And for Republicans to even criticize anybody else after you have a Republican president who did that, you have no credibility.
That's totally different. He was using the game in the stadium in the uniform as a
The difference is the President of the United States was using his platform.
No, Colin Kaepernick was using the stage in the game.
The President of the United States is using his platform to try to silence American citizens.
I don't understand. Why is it that Colin Kaepernick suddenly doesn't have First Amendment rights.
He does.
But
Because
Jack-
he's going to
but
stay there,
Jack-
does.
right?
He has First Amendment rights as soon as he's off the job.
Oh,
That's
wait,
just
no,
like
no,
Jackson
no,
Dart.
no,
the First Amendment works, baby. That's not the way the First Amendment
you
works.
only have First Amendment rights when you're not playing
His
football.
politics belongs off the field.
come on.
Jackson Dart
doesn't make
shouldn't be
any
engaging in
sense.
politics
And Donald
on the field
Trump's
here either.
threats exist outside the White House, and yet here
the
we
football
are.
field a no Constitution zone?
So wait a minute. Steve Kerr is to Mark's point. Steve Kerr is allowed to, and every other coach who hates Donald Trump or player who hates Donald Trump, that's not politicizing anything. That's not inappropriate.
No, it totally is.
I mean, I guess I think that yes, I think criticizing players right now on either side of the aisle doesn't make a lot of sense. But I also think you have to grapple with what he just said about the Colin Kaepernick of it all, because what's different about that is that it's not just other players or random people on the internet. It was the president of the United States, not just that one time, but repeatedly using his platform to attack an individual player for speaking out, not about partisan politics, mind you, but about social issues that he thought was important. The president used his platform to do that, and that player
he was exiled from the
blackballed,
NFL, and by the
right?
way,
He
was
was
able to
blackballed from the
settle
NFL.
with the NFL for
He
his
didn't get a
collusion
contract
case
he
because of that.
stunk. That's why he didn't get another
Look, I'm not a
contract.
football
That's
expert,
why-
but I'll let
Of
Jemele
course
handle
it's true.
that.
No, it's not
He
true at all.
stunk.
Based on what?
Jackson Dart's a
There's a lot
rising
of
star.
there's a lot of
Oh,
stinky
okay. Good
football
luck with
players
that,
who still
Susan.
have contracts.
The NFL will take
That's up to NFL owners.
people who are guilty of serious crimes and put them on the field on Sunday if they think they can help them win. If they thought Colin Kaepernick could help them win, they would put him on the field.
Well, I tell you what the
They never had a
NFL doesn't do. The NFL doesn't typically settle collusion cases. They settled his. And why? Because the depositions, Donald Trump made a call to Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, and told him that this is a winning issue for me, Colin Kaepernick. Basically, he put the code red on why he doesn't have a job. And that's why Colin won the case.
Colin Kaepernick wasn't playing
Totally.
for Jerry
All right.
Jones. And
Well,
Jerry Jones doesn't have the
well,
answers
sometimes
the Niners do.
Let me play this. This is what Joy Behar from The View said, which kind of underscores a little bit of what Deja was saying and what Jemele was saying about the politics of doing this in a state like New York. Listen.
For somebody to back a guy like Trump, whose history in discrimination and racism goes back to housing discrimination.
In the 70s,
In the 70s, DEI attacks, and posting pictures of the Obamas as apes. When he's on a team that's 55% to 60% the NFL is that many people, that much percentage of black people. Black. That is just the definition of stupidity and racist, in my opinion.
So there's a difference between what he can do, what he's allowed to do, and what might be the right thing to do. He's the quarterback for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, you said that the NFL will put anybody on the field that could win them a game because that's their goal. But in fact, their goal is actually to sell tickets. And I think we'll be left to see. You can
It's
say
hard to
what
sell
you want
tickets
to
if you're
say.
losing.
Well, and maybe, it's also
It's true.
hard.
It's reality.
Right. But I think we're going to see how this plays out in the stadiums and online. And in fact, the discourse I've seen online is largely people saying that this was embarrassing and just an unforced error.
And I would disagree about the
Depends on your
media,
algorithm,
the
I
media
suspect.
part. Well, yeah, because I would say I would disagree about the media part because I think the media actually has come harder at Abdul Carter than Jackson Dart.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, just as we saw in that clip of The View.
That's one show.
Next for us, the panel's going to